I don't know that I really want to get too specific about it, but I do think second marriages are wonderful. I think you're much clearer about what it is that you want and don't want, and you spend the time getting to know that person a little bit more.
Hi, and welcome to 5 Random Questions, the show where every question is an adventure. I'm your host, Danny Brown, and each week I'll be asking my guests 5 questions created by a random question generator. The guest has no idea what the questions are, and neither do I, which means this could go either way. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this week's episode. Today's guest is Tom Webster. Tom is partner at Sounds Profitable, a collection of media properties that provides industry-leading research around podcast most pressing questions. Previously, he was Senior Vice President at Edison Research, and he's also the co-author of the annual Infinite Dial study that looks at the habits and trends of the podcasting industry. He's also a Podcast Hall of Fame inductee. So Tom, with the very, very impressive bio, welcome to 5 Random Questions.
Thanks, Danny. And I just want to let you know that I'm terrified, just absolutely terrified of this format, because I like to control everything. So,
well, I was going to say, I mean, you're a very, when I've seen you speak and when I've met you, spoken to you, you seem a very confident person. So it's interesting to hear this is like throwing you a little bit, which is, that's a fun part of this show, I feel.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I enjoy the speaking. I don't know if it's confidence or not, but it's preparation times anxiety times just the number of reps I've had doing it. But I don't know. I don't know what you've seeded this random question generator with. So
yeah,
we're going to find out together.
Put little AI prompts in there just to throw you completely. And I'd mentioned, obviously, your bio is super impressive, very professional, with lots of achievements over the years. But for anyone that follows you on Blue Sky, that's a complete opposite and super simple, where all you do is you mention that you do podcasting, stats, and jokes, and that's pretty much it. So what's your favourite joke about podcasting or stats, or favourite joke overall? And this isn't part of the random questions, I'm just curious.
Oh, yeah. I don't know about a favourite joke about stats, but a line that I cite a lot when I see, there's 2 kinds of research, right? There's research to show and there's research to know. And I try to do a lot of research to know. There are plenty of people who do research to show. They have a preordained idea that they want to, quote unquote, prove, right? And the thing that I will often say about that is that they're using statistics like a drunkard uses a lamppost for support, not illumination. So there you go. There's some statistics comedy for you, Danny. There's not a lot of that in the world. That might be the only statistics joke I know.
That's good. I'm going to open now with that. If I ever do any speaking, I'm going to open with that and say, hey, it's good enough for Tom, it's good enough for you guys. And speaking, well, not really speaking of jokes as such, but speaking of stepping away from your professional life, you made me super jealous last week because you got to see legendary UK rock vocalist John Waite in concert. Yeah. Without making me feel even more jealous. How was it?
It was phenomenal. I think John Waite has never gotten his full due, right? Not to go too far down memory lane with everybody, but, he had some great songs with the Babies. He had some great songs with Bad English, some great songs solo. But the thing that just kind of blew me away, and I saw him in a fairly small venue, was just how great and in the same key and range his voice still is at 73. And he closed the show with this bananas version of Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin that Robert Plant could not even do today in that way. And it was just I don't know. I just left so full of joy because for 90 minutes, he just sang his face off. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't have loved that show.
No, I almost wonder if the singers from that era, because obviously he was in the Babies in the 70s, then he did his solo stuff, and then in Bad English, kind of late 80s, mid 90s. Yep. I wonder if the singers from that era just have that longer lasting vocal range compared to, I'm not putting down any singers today, but I think of, you mentioned Robert Plant, I think of Steve Perry at Journey, people like that, Ann Wilson of Heart, they still seem to be able to hit these notes and sing these songs when they should just be relaxing in retirement as a pensioner.
You would, I don't know. I just sort of look at it like they just love it. You know what I mean? There are probably a lot of people working at insurance companies that when they retire think, oh, I'm going to become a singer because that's what I would have rather have done. Well, I think if you have been a rock star, a pop star, or, just a gigging working vocalist, why would you quit that as long as your voice holds out? I'm very jealous of all that.
I hear you. Well, speaking of doing something that you do outside of what you do as a day job, it's time for 5 random questions, I feel. Let's get you in this hot seat, Tom. And
All
let's
right.
bring up the random question
Spicy.
generator. We'll see what comes up here. So let's have a look then. Question number 1. Okay, this is a nice, easy one, he says, to open up the episode. Question number 1, Tom. What are some things that you should not say at a funeral?
Oh, some things you should not say at a funeral. Okay. I think number 1 would be, is there going to be food here? Because I'm starving. I think that's at the funeral itself. That's probably not great. I'm happy to see they got what they deserved. Would probably be low on the list, right? And like that guy. Thank God. Yeah, things you should not say at a funeral. That's yeah. I'm gonna go with that. Couldn't have happened to a better person.
Well, I think that it's weird because, like you say, you've got the funeral and then obviously you've got the service, I guess, afterward. So I'm guessing this is on about the funeral, whether that's the burial or the cremation. I was trying to think of the word for the not burial, the cremation.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever been to, like, without being too morbid, but have you ever been to a funeral where someone said something that you've heard and you thought, ooh, shouldn't maybe not go there?
You know, it's funny. Like, I think anybody that's been to a service of any kind, the funny thing to me is how people, nobody is a perfect angel, or maybe there are. I guess I am, Danny. But it's how people kind of dance around. Bob was a complicated man. And that's always like, it's code for something. Like, he was actually detestable, but this is not the time or place to say that. And so it always comes out as this code that everybody can parse. Like, Jill had no problem expressing herself, as I'm sure many of you know. But there's always just that code, but you're still saying the same thing, and everybody knows it.
It's like that passive-aggressive compliment, right? Like you said, that there's a story behind it, and maybe you'll grab that person later, over the buffet or something. But there's a story there. But it's weird how, like, I'm always a fan of, like, celebrating death. So I like the last 2 funerals I've been to, it's all been about celebration, not, being encouraged not to be sad. You can grieve, obviously, but maybe in your own time or whatever. And I feel like it'd be fun, for want of a better word, when you're talking about funerals and death, etc. But it'd be fun to have people just roast dead people. You see these like roasts on TV, and like obviously Nikki Fraser did some amazing roast. Was it Nikki Fraser? Is that her name?
Nikki Fraser. Yeah.
Did some amazing roast recently. It'd be interesting to see roasts at a funeral. That, to your point, you always try to be respectful, right? And it'd be interesting to flip that a little bit.
I think the posthumous roast is a fantastic idea, but I think that event would have to be invite only. I think there'd be some generational issues with that. And, there's a difference between friends and family. So I think someone would have to be very selective about inviting people to that. Otherwise it could, it could end in the wrong kind of tears for somebody. But I love the idea. Maybe I'll stipulate that for my own funeral. Yeah. It's too bad I won't be there.
Oh, and that's the thing, right? You want it to be fun and silly and maybe cause a bit of, not consternation, but just a different environment. But you're not going to know if that worked or not, are you? It's like one of these things that you'll just never know, I guess.
Yeah, and everybody has unfinished business with the dead. And the funeral may not be the place to kind of work that out, I think about when, my own father died about 1.5 years ago. And we didn't actually have a funeral for him. We just sort of, okay, that's it. And there was not an unfinished business ceremony. There certainly could have been, I think. But I think just leave that be.
I hear you. Well, speaking of leaving it be, and I enjoyed this one as an icebreaker, if you like, for your 5 questions. Speaking
Pretty
of
tough icebreaker, Danny.
Hey, well, I have no control over what pops up, mate. This is like completely new for me.
Yeah. And now it's more about death.
Let's leave death in question 1 behind and see what we have for question 2. Well, this is like a nice easy one then to ease into that from question 2. And we're recording this on a Thursday, so it's pretty timely as well. Tom, question number 2. Are you doing anything fun this weekend?
I deeply love my wife, and we have a great marriage, great relationship. We've been married 13 years this year, and for a variety of reasons, she's been gone like 20 of the last 30 days. She had a trip with her two sons from a different marriage. Her father had passed a little while ago, and so she had to go and take care of some business for that. So I just haven't seen her in a long time, and we're just going to have a fantastic date. Like, we have not been out to dinner, I think, in a month, and we desperately both need it. So we're heading to a Boston hotspot, since I'm here in Boston, and we're going to have a nice date, and I'm really looking forward to that.
And you'd mentioned, obviously, Tamsin's been, your wife Tamsin, she's been very busy. And you've been speaking quite a lot earlier this year, obviously, with the reports that came out, as I mentioned in the intro there. Is that like a regular, well, not sort of regular, maybe semi-regular, where you're both kind of not passing ships, but it's harder to organize date nights and stuff because you're both so busy?
Oh, for sure. I mean, she speaks a lot at conferences. I speak a lot at conferences, and there are conference seasons, and so there are definitely times when we're both away from home, and those times don't overlap very well, and it can just be these like long stretches, and complicated by the fact that we have two greyhounds, and we live in downtown Boston. There's no place to really board them conveniently, so taking care of the dogs is like I think 90% of my life is dog management, and the other 10 is podcasting and sundry other things. So it really does become a logistical challenge to have a date, because the dogs really can't be left alone for too long. I mean, they're anxious greyhounds, and who knows what they're going to get up to when we're not here. And it's not that they'll tear up our shoes and clothes and stuff. It's that they'll sit at the door and just cry. And, nobody wants that.
And it's going to be fun for your neighbours, I feel, having because we have like 3 little dogs, and 2 of them can be quite loud, even though they're little dogs.
Well, our immediate neighbor, we live on the 26th floor of a high-rise in downtown Boston, and we're in a corner unit. And the corner unit directly across the hall from us is the leasing office. So that is the last thing we want, are like 2 whining, barking dogs. Oh, they don't really bark, but right across from the leasing office. It's the leasing office just moved there. And, we used to, before the leasing office was here, let the dogs run in the halls just to kind of burn off some, because it's hard to let greyhounds run, and you can't really, they won't come back. And we were joking that with the leasing office up here, that they'd be bringing prospective tenants up to this floor, and all of a sudden they would see that this floor is guarded by Cerberus, or, some like whirling vortex of giant dogs. And that would be a good reason not to live here. But anyway, it is a logistical challenge, but it's that's what life is. So.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And what would be, so obviously you mentioned it's hard to organise a date. You're in Boston. I've only been in Boston once, but I loved it. I was there many years ago. And downtown Boston especially, like, amazing place to go. What would be your ideal, perfect date night that's easy to arrange but makes for a really good memory? So for someone coming to Boston, what would be a great recommendation is for a date as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's, people don't often talk about Boston for food, but I think, a night in the north end of Boston would be a lot of fun. Pick any one of dozens of great Italian restaurants in the north end. It's a very Italian neighborhood. And then they're all sort of traditional in a way that none of them serve dessert, because they want you to go to the dessert place across the street or the dessert place next door, and you just sort of build a night around that. And and of course it's a very walkable city. There's a little brick path called the Freedom Trail that runs right outside our front door. It's because we're right next to the old State House where the Boston Massacre happened. It's literally next door to us, but not so much massacring anymore. But it's just a very walkable city. There's so much history, and I think for you and I both have many friends from Europe. I think it's the most European city in America.
No, that's a good description, actually. It's one of the things I found when I went there. And like I said, it was years ago. I think it was probably 2012, 2013, something like that. And I had a friend, I still have a friend, he's not dead. Go on the subject of death. I still have a friend.
I had a friend. I still have him, but I had him too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to not be my friend when he listens to this. But yeah, I would agree with that. It is a very, cosmopolitan, cultural, European vibe city, which is pretty cool to see, in North America.
Yeah, and it's also got pockets and neighborhoods. It's not a sort of homogenous city. It's a city where people live downtown. I think to me, anytime you have a city where people live downtown, as opposed to commuting from suburbs and things like that, I think that's a healthy city. So we love it here. I mean, I did my undergraduate work at Tufts University, which is in a suburb of Boston. So, that was my formative years were here. And I've lived around the world, around the country, but I've been back here for 15 years and no plans on leaving. I love this city. It's expensive, but it's worth it.
And it's home, right? It's like you say,
and it's
you got the wife, you got the two kids, you got the two dogs. Is it two kids or is it more? You mentioned two from
my wife has two sons with her ex, and they live with him in the North End. Actually, they're just half a mile away from us. And I have a son. I have a son in college right now, so no kids actually at home.
Nice. Well, I've got like two teens at home at the moment, so once again, you're making me super jealous. You got John Waite, you got no kids at home. I'm have to end this episode pretty soon, mate. I'm not not enjoying this waiting push back at me.
Well, won't be long.
On that front, on being jealous, I'm not going to be jealous of this anymore. Let's have a look at seeing what question number 3 brings up. Okay. And yeah, I'm curious about this. So you travel a lot with professionally, Tom. Your wife travels. But what is your favourite holiday? And it can be a destination or a holiday that you had, prior.
We have spent the last 3 years and upcoming of this summer, a fourth, spending lots of time in Italy. And we have really, really enjoyed it. We've gone deep on Italy. And my wife has been Duolingoing Italian pretty nonstop throughout the whole thing, and she's able to navigate things really, really well. So this July we're going to Torino and Milan. My wife's been to Milan. I've not been to Milan, but we've both been to Rome and Napoli and Florence and all throughout Sicily. We spent a whole week in Sicily, and in Palermo and Taormina and I've just really enjoyed it. And, the first time that we went there, we did a Disney adventure vacation. And I highly recommend Disney vacation planning. It's not full of Minnies and Mickeys and Goofies. It's just really high-end service, right? And we went to Sicily for a week. And this was a couple years ago. And it was the week in Europe that was like the hottest week on record, hotter than the sun. And we spent the whole week in temperatures that were, 113, 115. I don't know how many of you are centigrade that is, Danny, but it's probably
That's
a
hot.
lot.
Yeah.
It's really, really hot, right?
That's 40 plus, I think.
Yeah. And in the blinding sun and with outdoor activities with 2 Disney Adventure tour guides. And, there were 20 of us, right? It was a small group. And what kind of blew me away about it was nobody complained. Nobody, everybody could have complained. They could have, moaned and kvetched and everything else the whole week just about how dreadfully hot it was. But we all just sort of accepted it. We drank lots of water, and we had this wonderful trauma bonding experience, coupled with how much we loved the people and the food and everything else. And it just, we just kind of fell in love with it.
What is it about Italy in particular? So obviously you mentioned the last 4 years now, or this will be the 4th year. Italy's been the agenda, the destination. What is about Italy in particular? Is it the people? Is it the culture, like the food, etc.? What's it for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of it is the landscape and the architecture. The food is incredible. We certainly, especially throughout Sicily, there's, people take a real pride in, no matter what the size, scope, and budget of the restaurant is, people take a real pride in food there, and it shows in everything they do. But I just love going through narrow cobblestone streets, and then you all of a sudden enter a courtyard, and there's this magnificent church or this magnificent fountain that, and there's one of those every couple of blocks. You know what I mean? It's just, and that's true in so many cities there. And it was just really easy to navigate, and the people were really, really friendly. And I've traveled a lot throughout Europe, and I don't have stereotypes about people and cultures, but there are cities that are not as friendly, right? And they can be just large cities, and people are busy and they don't have time to talk to strangers. But between Tamsin's halting Italian and better than halting, and my slow, loud English, everyone was really, really friendly to us. And I think it's a great tourist destination for I think folks in North America.
It's interesting you mentioned about not so much people, but cities can be unfriendly. Like, I'm from Edinburgh, but I find Glasgow a far friendlier city. Not even just for Scots people, but anybody visiting Scotland. If you choose to go to, say, Edinburgh or Glasgow, you'll probably find Glaswegians are more conversational and open to striking up a conversation. I find the same in Toronto. I love Toronto as a city. I love Toronto's people, and it's a very multicultural city, but I find it's very heads down. We're super busy. We have to be someplace, whereas you go somewhere like a Montreal, very friendly, very conversational, etc. Yeah. It's funny how just different cities have that appeal, or not appeal, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very true. And I think, you get that experience in France, for example. I think if you are an American in Paris, you're going to have a difficult time. But if you're an American in Toulouse or somewhere in the South, you're not. And, some of it's just how fast paced the culture is, and how much time people have to give you. And Paris is just like New York. It's really big and full of very busy people on their way to doing something else that just don't have a lot of time for you. And that's not the case in maybe some other cities in France. So I don't typically tend to stereotype the French, because I've just had so many different experiences there. I do have a funny Glasgow story. This was back in the late 90s. I used to do a lot of consulting work in radio throughout the UK. And one of the things that I often consulted on were Ofcom applications. Ofcom is this entity that you basically, that regulates who gets radio signals and who can start new stations and things like that. And often in a city, an application opportunity would come up that Ofcom would allow a new signal in that city. And so you'd have to do applications, and you'd have to show research and do your work. And so I did a lot of that research and consulting. And I worked on an application in Glasgow, and I did some music testing there. And I was there with a colleague of mine. His name was Hal. And, Hal was up there playing music off of he had a laptop, because we had this sort of electronic testing thing, like dials people had, that they were responding to these various snippets of songs, how much they liked them or didn't like them. I was in my late 20s, I guess. And, we'd played about 50 of these song clips. And all of a sudden, this guy at the very back of the room, like full beard, thick cable knit fisherman sweater, raises his hand. And Hal goes, yeah, sir, do you have a question? And he stands up and he goes, Hal, have you no got better music in your computer, man? I'll just never forget that. Because that kind of, threw off the rest of the night a little bit. But have you no got better? It just killed me. Hal!
And I love the fact he's got his big raglan on. He's probably coming from doing some fishing, catching some of the fish or whatever.
Undoubtedly. Yeah, just straight off the boat.
It's funny you mentioned Ofcom there as well, because I feel, if I remember, it's been a while since I've not been in the UK for 20 years, and so I forget terms, etc. But isn't Ofcom just simply the Office of Communications? That's what it stands for?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a very sort of Harry Potter kind of 1984 vibe, where it's just like a straightforward name, but it sounds very official and very, serious. The Office of Communications.
It's a bizarre system. You have to basically, when you put in, this may be way off topic, but when you apply for a new station through Ofcom, you have to show that it's not going to materially compete or materially damage other commercial radio stations in that market. It's fine if it competes with the BBC, but it's not, like here in America, the cities are very over radio. There are too many signals. You have, 3 or 4 country stations in a market. We have Spotify. We don't really need 3 or 4 country stations. We need one great one. But with Ofcom, if there's an existing station in your format, you can't just start a signal and do that and try and do it better. You have to show that, we wouldn't harm them at all. It's a very complicated system, but it was I've won a few and I've lost a few.
That's interesting. I never knew that about WorldCom. So they're encouraging, encouraging growth in smaller radio stations because you can't open up something that's already there. So it kind of protects the little guy from that side, I feel.
Yeah, and honestly, I agree with all that. I mean, we have none of those protections here in the United States, and as a result, we have a very unhealthy commercial broadcast radio. That's in constant decline. That has too many ads, too much repetition and replication in markets, and it could do with some regulation because but that's another show.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I have another podcast that I co-host with my colleague from Captivate, where I work, called In and Around Podcast. And then last night, I recorded an episode with James, our friend James Cridland from Pod News. And he's obviously a big, huge radio. He's got the radio background as well. I feel that you two together could have an amazing conversation about the ins, the outs, the do's, the don'ts of radio and where it could go.
Yeah, I just think, a lot of the attitudes about radio in America are influenced by American radio. And there's a couple of really big differences in American radio. American radio is largely deregulated compared to other markets. Most markets, especially in Europe, are very protected. And the other thing that America does not have, which, any European country does, is a state broadcaster. America doesn't have a state broadcaster. And a state broadcaster, it's not a sinister thing. It's a wonderful thing it's a high budget, lots of investment. People take pride in it, and that's true across pretty much all of Europe. And there aren't so many commercial radio stations. They can all sort of coexist in a market and do very well. And the European radio market is much, much healthier. The American radio market, unfortunately, has shot itself in the foot in a number of ways, and they're kind of burning the furniture to keep warm. So.
It's a shame to see. I know, like I mentioned, James, very much in radio background, but it's a shame to see. I know a lot of the local stations here are struggling because of streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, etc. And I grew up as listening to radio. Like my granddad would have it on, I'd listen to it, would listen to the sports results coming through, and you don't get that now. You just check your phone and say, okay, yeah, great, my team won, and it's a shame to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I grew up with great radio as a companion. And, one of the things that the radio business in America did in response to things like, Pandora and then Spotify and some of the other services was they tried to out Pandora, and they shut their personalities up. And, as a result of that, they just became the same thing except with 20 ads. And that's simply non-competitive, especially for internet radio.
Yeah, I hear you.
Do you love being surprised by an interesting story from an unlikely source? So do we at the Baggage Podcast, where four friends, a doctor, a prosecutor, a comedian, and a writer, interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. There's the Vietnam vet recounting his war stories from 50 plus years ago, or the COVID virologist trying to do her job at the height of the pandemic. There's also the comedian who had a fatal asthma attack during a show. That's right, I said fatal. We've had these and many other fascinating guests and continue to find more all the time. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, check us out. Search for Baggage wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey there, Danny here. This podcast will forever be free to listen to. But if you enjoy 5 Random Questions and get value from the show and want to support it, you can do that with a donation of your choosing over at 5randomquestions.com/support. And thanks so much for supporting the show. Now, back to this week's episode. So there you go, listeners. If you want to have Tom, really go on a deep dive, ask him about radio. And I feel we could speak about this for hours and hours, but we don't have hours and hours, unfortunately, no, Tom. So we don't. Let's have a look at question number 4. Okay, here we go. This is like a bit more of a serious one, maybe. Question number 4, Tom. What is your biggest regret?
Wow, my biggest regret. I try not to have too many of those in life. I really don't. But I will say something that I think probably a lot of people share that have had my experiences, both men and women. I'm divorced, and I have a Tamsin is my second wife. My first wife is a brilliant molecular biologist. She's a university professor, and I think anytime you have a marriage end, you have to have regrets, right? Because you entered into it not thinking it was going to end, and you ended it knowing it had to end. And in between that was a whole series of cascading missteps by one or both of you, likely both of you. And I think I would regret, I don't know that I really want to get too specific about it, but I do think second marriages are wonderful. I think you're much clearer about what it is that you want and don't want. And you spend the time getting to know that person a little bit more. And, I don't believe I've made any of those mistakes with Tamsin. So, knock on felt and wood here. I hope I don't have a second regret.
I hear you. I think that's, like you say, it's something that, anybody that's been through it as well can understand. I know my wife's mom, she doesn't listen to this show, so she's okay. I'm okay. But I know my wife's mum, she's been married 3 times. She's on her 3rd marriage. And there's a running joke in the family about, is this one going to last? Is it not going to last, etc. But she does say that each time she takes something away from what she learned from marriage 1 or marriage 2, and what kind of person wasn't right, the dynamic, etc. And this has been her longest marriage, longest lasting. So I feel like you say, there's definitely regrets of anything that ends like that, but the lessons can help you, to the next stage of what that looks like.
Yeah, and I don't believe I would be, to the extent that I am a good husband, as good a husband I am to Tamsin, without the things that I really learned from that first marriage. So, I hope it doesn't take multiple for everybody, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned that obviously there's kids from first marriages, etc. as well. I know a lot of times, maybe more with people that date as opposed to being married, but maybe married as well. A lot of times there's recommendations, you should stay together for the kids. Do you think that's, in general, bad advice? Again, you don't have to be too specific, mate. But
it's terrible advice. It is absolutely terrible advice. Yeah, I was such a better... so my son is now 20. He's a sophomore at Colorado Boulder. And... when we got divorced, he was fairly young. I think he was maybe 5, something like that. And I was a much better father to him after that. And I think what he ended up getting as a result of that was his mother's undivided attention when he was with her, and my undivided attention when he was with me. And, was it disruptive? I'm sure it was disruptive, but I don't know. He's on a full scholarship with straight A's in college. He did okay. I'm incredibly proud of him. And, would that have happened had we stayed together? I don't doubt that it would, but it would have been a different and potentially more difficult experience. So I think staying together for the kids is really outdated advice. I think providing as the fewest disruptions and the most support for your kids as possible, whatever that means, that's the advice.
No, I like I said, I've got 2 teens, and if my wife and I ever did divorce, I'd like to think we could still be friends and we'd do it amicably, and we'd understand that we're doing it because we don't want the kids to be disrupted, right? We don't want them to see us fall out of love with each other, hate each other, and get really bad, and what all that could bring.
Yeah, I mean, you hope that's true. I think it took my ex-wife and I many years to kind of get to that level of détente, I think. But in no case did we ever litigate this in front of our son. So I think ultimately it was good that we divorced.
And as you mentioned, it's, and this sounds flippant, I 100% apologize, but it all worked out for the best because now, you're happy. I'm assuming hopefully your ex-wife is happy, and obviously your son is doing really, really well in his life as well.
Yeah, no regrets about any of that.
That's always good to hear. Well, Tom, we've almost made it through to the end. So without further ado, question number 5. Interesting. So that kind of ties in with the one we've just had, I guess. But let's have a look anyway. Question number 5. Would you rather be rich and never find true love, or be poor and find true love?
I would say I would rather be poor and find true love. But I mean, I did not grow up in wealth, and I can make it work. You know what I mean? But I do know how important it is for me to have a partner, and especially because I don't know about you, but I'm a real introvert. I'm an incredibly introverted person, right? You put me in a room at a party or something like that, and I will not talk to anybody unless they come and talk to me first. And that's one of the reasons why I worked to get really good at public speaking, because when I go to an event and I give a keynote, people will come up to me, and that's helpful to me. So, but having that sort of one great partner in your life, a lot of pressure on them. But I would rather have that than all the gold in the world.
It's like that, the old saying, right? If you want to be truly rich, be happy. You can have all the gold in the world, all the riches, like everything. But sometimes, you look at some celebrities and they look as if life is amazing. They've got millions in the bank. They've got yachts, private jets, celebrity hanging off beautiful looking dates, men and women when they go to events, etc. But then you see them after and they just look unhappy and, sometimes get into bad places through whatever reasons. I feel like the real happiness comes deep inside, like you say, where it makes you be a better person and be a really content, happy, confident person, maybe.
Well, here's my stipulation, though. I would rather be poor and find my true love. One of my criteria for my true love is that she be incredibly wealthy.
And, if anything, touch wood, touch my felt kind of gaming mat-esque wood kind of thing. This never happened. But if anything ever did happen between you and Tamsin, maybe there's a rich Italian widow waiting in Sicily or, somewhere like that. That could, on one of the destinations, on one of the vacations way in the future.
I think by that time, Danny, I would be more inclined to just pull a long con on that widow and just spend just enough time with her to get sort of, get her to trust me, get access to her checking account, and then I'm gone. It would just be a long con if that ever happened. So don't be surprised.
Well, I was going to say, that's very specific there about how you would do it. It sounds like you've been thinking about this in the background, mate.
I've taken notes over the years. So, look, you just have to be prepared for anything, Danny. And you never know what life is going to throw you. And if circumstances ever change in my life, I have to be prepared for a life on the run.
It's like I watch this TV show in the UK. But I watch it on YouTube now. It's like broadcast in the UK. And it's got Would I Lie to You? And one of the things that one of the contestants, like a comedy shows, questions, stuff like that, one of the guests was saying he'd buried £1,000, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things, but he'd buried that in case he has to go on a life on the run. And the whole story that came from that about, it's £1,000, or what would you going to do, and where he would go, etc. So yeah, I guess you would need a good backing behind you for a life on the run. Yeah,
exactly. I think I should be burying things in cities all across the world, Danny. I think that's probably a good idea. Just have a go bag in every city for when it happens.
Exactly. Well, speaking of the unexpected and speaking of planning things out, we've got to the end of the 5 unexpected random questions, and it's, as is the only fair thing to do now, I've had you on the hot seat for the last almost 40 minutes now. So it's time for me to pass the baton over to you, Tom, and throw open to your random question.
Yes. Well, my question is not random. It's I thought about it. And that is, Danny, I've known you for a number of years. I think we first met at maybe like a blog world or something like that in a very different life, right? And what's been the biggest change in your life since then, and what prompted it?
Probably the biggest change is moving to Canada, I guess, back in 2006, so 20 years next year. Mm-hmm. And it was my wife. It's always a girl, it's always a boy, that's why you move. But no, I was very happy in the UK, and doing very different stuff. I wasn't in media or anything. I was like a typical corporate marketer working for British Telecom. So it was like a very, very different person then, I guess. But yeah, I got to meet my wife online on the Dashboard Confessional official website forum. Music again, so music is my background. I feel like yours as well, mate. Music has so many histories, and the question was, do I move to Canada? Does she move to the UK? And I felt like she had a much more strong family base than I did. I don't really keep in touch with my family. We had a big falling out, which is another story for another time. But a big falling out, so I don't really keep in touch with them. So it made that decision easy. But then I had to sort of reinvent myself because I was going through like visas and work permits and stuff like that. Did a lot of crappy freelance gigs originally. And Jacqueline, my wife, was amazing, and her mum was amazing at supporting us as well while we got started. So that would probably be the biggest change, is being this super corporate, super business, career-minded guy to being now where I don't really give a crap about, financial, success and blah, blah. It'd be nice to have money, but I don't give a crap about that. And living in Canada and having 2 kids and raising kids, and then moving to like a tiny little village where we live now, as opposed to just outside Toronto where we used to live. So probably a big change from super corporate, super business to like, just life is life. And maybe that's a sign of getting older as well, mate, and changing priorities, right?
I think so. I mean, I think that's just a sign of being increasingly comfortable in your own skin as much as anything else.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned you're an introvert as well. A lot of podcasters, a lot of creators are introverts. I'm very introverted. I hate networking. I hate big events like Podcast Movement. I'd rather be in the corner with someone I feel really trusted and safe with and just chatting with them.
That's totally me. And actually, that's one reason why my partner at Sounds Profitable, Brian Barletta, and I are such a good fit, because Brian really understands me, like thoroughly understands me. And he knows that, after I give, he's energized by people. And if he wants, if I want to meet somebody, he will introduce us. Like, he will just dive right in. And he also understands that when I'm done giving a keynote or something, that regardless of what it looked like on stage, I'm exhausted. And he understands that this is not the time to ask me to do anything. This is the time to like wheel me into carbonite storage until I'm ready to come out. So that partnership has worked really well.
Well, I shall, if I'm at an event where you are, I shall hunt you down. That sounds awful. I shall look out for you and try to keep you occupied for 5-10 minutes at least, where you don't have to worry about anybody else.
That would be lovely.
And I'm being selfish there, because that would be great for me too, just to hang out with one person.
That would be lovely.
We shall look forward to it. So again, Tom, I really enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about you away from the professional side that we generally hear from you. For people that want to know more about Sounds Profitable, about what you do from a speaking point of view, about your musical tastes, etc., where's the best place to either follow you online or connect with you, etc.? Yeah,
I mean, soundsprofitable.com has a huge treasure trove of resources about podcasting, and our LinkedIn page does as well. I can be found on Blue Sky, and I think that's Tom Webster Media, I think, is my account at, I believe, at Blue Sky. And that is not typically a place where I talk about marketing and business and things like that. That's generally where I share funny photos or music related things. So I try not to cross the streams on social media all that much, because that gets really tiresome.
I hear you, and I'll be sure, and obviously, like I said, Tom does make me jealous because he drops stuff on Blue Sky about gigs that he's going to and people I'd love to see live. So, if you want to upset me even further, follow Tom and then just share his stuff with me anytime the music stuff.
Fantastic.
Comes. But I will be sure to leave these links in the show notes as always. So if you're listening on your favourite podcast app or listening online on the website, check out the show notes for the episode. All the links will be there to take you through to Tom. So again, Tom, thank you so much for appearing on today's 5 Random Questions.
Danny, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to 5 Random Questions. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to leave a review on the app you're currently listening on. And if you know someone else that would enjoy the show, be sure to send them this way. It's very much appreciated. Until the next time, keep asking those questions.